Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Earth to Taylor with me, your host, Taylor. I know I've been MIA for the last couple months. I literally moved out of the country for the summer, moved back to America after the summer was over, reluctantly, but as life would have it, I am back, and I want to get right back into our Gnosticism series. Right now, we are on episode 3, and today's episode, I named it The Erasure and Resurrection of the Divine Feminine Across Time, Culture, and Dimensions. Reason being I named it that is because this is not just about Gnosticism today. I want to kind of walk you guys through how my brain picked up on the threading of how many stories throughout history has there been in Gnosticism they believe in emanationism, and Sophia is the emanation of wisdom, right? This archetype of divine wisdom being a woman has been shown throughout history in many different stories in many different cultures, thousands and thousands of years apart. Okay. And the stories almost say the same fucking thing, which I just thought was crazy. And as I prepared for this episode, this is literally also, you guys, my third time re recording this episode. And so fingers fucking locked that this is going to work this time. So I don't know if it's because I just, I always try to take it as, if the episode's not working, maybe there was something I left out, or I said something that I wasn't supposed to say, or, but maybe it's just because there's a couple things that I left out and didn't thread it together as well as I should have in the last 2 recordings of it. So I want to make sure to get this point across. The archetype of a divine feminine wisdom, again, has been talked about multiple times throughout history. And it is just very crazy to me that I see now more than ever, as I led up to my research of this episode, rereading these stories of these women that we're going to talk about today throughout history, that this same story has been told time and time again. And for me personally, before I even got into Gnosticism, what made me really start going down the Gnostic pathway was understanding Mary Magdalene. So for Mary Magdalene and me, we're going to talk about her at the very end of this episode. But the more questions that I started to ask about her, the more things that started to flood into my memory of just whether it was through meditation or later on through my own research of this same archetype of a woman that was very magical in her own divine way, but was downplayed or watered down to seem like she was something that she wasn't, or that Mary was just a prostitute, or that Mary was just somebody that was just around Jesus, all the time for no apparent reason, just because she wanted to be around him. It's just simply not the truth. And today I want to thread together a couple stories first of other women throughout history that are like major stories. And then at the end, we'll get back to Mary. And I want to go through why Jesus chose Mary specifically and what she represented with him and what he did with her. Okay. So again, let's recap a little bit first to kind of start off with Sophia and what her story was. So in the beginning, after these emanations were made out of the only begotten son, Christos, okay, he came from Barbelo. And again, these are not gender. These beings are genderless. Think streams of consciousness, okay? Christos was the divine word logos, and he came from the monad in Barbelo, okay? Because Barbelo was like the first reflection of source, okay? The feminine reflection of source. Even if source refers to itself in some Gnostic texts as both feminine and masculine, she was the first reflection of himself, right? Or itself, not himself. Again, want to be careful with genders here. But Sophia, she was actually the youngest emanation. So the representation of her was wisdom, right? So again, just to recap quickly, she yearned to create, and whenever these emanations are made, they're made in zeitgeistes, right? So a feminine and a masculine pairs, okay? So these thought forms have feminine and masculine attributes to it, okay? And when you create one without the other, right, it is just by default flawed, okay? So when she created, she was the first emanation, the youngest, but the first emanation to create without her consort. It created like a rupture. So think of like plasma levels is kind of how I've pictured it in my brain as I've really thought about it and meditated on it and thought about it throughout the last like 2 years. Plasma like rupturing, like a membrane rupturing, literally like birthing, giving birth. Like literally women have a membrane that come out of them when they're about to give birth or getting close to going into labor. So think about that. And when that happened, it created the demiurge, which is like think the upside down in Stranger Things, right? And then the demiurge put forth a entity, a being, Yaldabaoth, which was a being that thought it was the creator of this world, or let's just say this point in space time, because if time is all at the same time, that means that there's multiple multiverses going on at the same time. It really is like Doctor Strange and fucking, you know, Matrix all mixed in together. Okay. So within that, though, when she fell, she became fragmented, and she embedded those fragments into all living things within Earth and Earth itself. So think Mother Earth being Sophia also. Think us as humans, right? In the Gnostic text, they talk about whenever Yaldabaoth created Adam and Eve, they were more clone-like, right? And to me, I just think like unconscious beings. But when she embedded herself, think about the snake, okay? When she gave them the bite of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it made them aware as humans. Okay. And when they became aware of like, oh my gosh, like we are entrapped inside of this fucking matrix, it gave them awareness. Okay. And all of these things are also representative of psychological archetypes. So think about these stories and not just like actual, just plain black and white stories. These represent more psychological things. And a human, there can be somebody, think NPC, that is walking around an alive human, but they're very asleep to what this world is, what this matrix is. Okay. So Sophia wanted to create, fell through, was fragmented, then had to embed herself, right, and give up her selfhood, really. And then to counteract that, the divine logos, the divine word, the masculine came down, right? And through Jesus Christ, which a lot of times this is where the Gnostics' beliefs came from, was after Jesus. Like, what does this mean? Okay. And understanding what Jesus was saying was that the kingdom of heaven is within you, right? So we're going to get into these stories where a lot of these stories say the same thing about a feminine and a masculine attributes, right? And how they have to do with each other, and that you can't have one without the other. And not just like you with a man, or a woman with a man, or a man with a woman, but you as a human yourself have feminine and masculine attributes. And when they are not balanced within yourself, right, that creates blockages. Remember my biofield episode, and I will do more on plasma and biofields later on when I'm done with my Gnosticism series, but it all relates, including to Mary Magdalene and to Sophia. So I want to get into a couple stories that are like so parallel that it's fucking insane to think about. And as I did this research, it even kind of just like blew my mind a little bit more of just like, wow, these stories have been said over and over and over again. And the names that I'm going to say that we're going to start off with, we're going to go through Inanna, Isis, Shakti, and then we're going to go to Mary Magdalene. So those four. So Inanna, Isis, Inanna, Isis, Shakti, and the goddess Nut. So we're going to go through that, and I'm going to talk about them, and we're just going to talk about how they're similar or parallel to the same story. And then you can go and look into these stories yourself. Anything that I ever say or anything I ever look up, research it yourself. I don't care. I'm just giving you information that my brain sees, and that's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So this is a story of Inanna, or Ishtar. So there's sometimes she's referenced in different ways. The time frame that she was kind of around was during ancient like Mesopotamia or ancient Samaria. So this is from the mythology of Samaria, okay? And I'll do an episode at some point later on and get into like the Anunnaki and all kinds of shit like that. But for this episode, I want everyone to understand the feminine aspect of it. And the earliest worship that was actually the oldest written goddess tradition, okay, was 3000 to 2500 BCE. So Inanna was the oldest written goddess tradition. Okay. Her archetype, or the names that they had for her, and nicknames that they had for her, if you will, are the Queen of Heaven, the Queen of Earth, the Goddess of Fertility, the Goddess of War, or the Goddess of Wisdom. Okay. And a little bit of a backstory. She was also in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And to kind of understand why this story happens that I'm about to explain, a smaller backstory is that at one point, Inanna wanted to get with Gilgamesh, but she was kind of known for like getting with men and just, using them for whatever she needed and then disregarding them, right? And so when she wanted to get with Gilgamesh, he turned her down and was like, no, like, I know how you are, blah, blah. And so she was angry and asked her father was it Enlil or was it, Enki. So her father was Enki, Enki, okay? And that has to do with other stories, but that's not the story for today. she asked her father Enki, hey, like, give me this bull that resided in heaven that is pretty much like a fighter that can go and kill, these pretty much mini gods that were walking around, right? Give me this bull so I can go and, fuck up Gilgamesh. And her father was like, no. And she like kind of threatened her dad, blah, blah. And then her dad was like, fine, like, I'll give you the bull. So the bull went down there, fought Gilgamesh amongst other men. And during that fight, that bull killed Inanna's sister's husband. So it killed her brother-in-law. Okay. So that is a backstory. She got her brother-in-law killed. So Inanna, she wanted to expand her power. She was already a very powerful ruler of just the world and just her influence. She was being worshipped throughout the world, whatever. So she wanted to expand her power. So she wanted to expand it down to the underworld. And the underworld was ruled by Erasure, her sister. Keep in mind what I just told you about her brother-in-law, okay? So determined, Inanna and her servant Ninshabar, they descended into the underworld. And to get to the very bottom of the underworld, remember, dimensions are not just, stacked on top, but in this story for this archetype, how they explain it, it sounds like you're just going down levels, right? To get there, there were 7 gates. I want y'all to also think about numerology and how specific numbers will come up throughout these stories as well. 7 gates. So she took her servant and they started to go through each gate. At each gate, she was forced to remove a piece of her clothing or jewelry until she stood naked and powerless at the very last one, right? So keep in mind when you are royalty, things like your garments, your jewelry, it is like tied within who you are, right? That is how you prove your royalty, is by these very expensive clothing. Like it represents your identity. Okay, so think about as she's stripping herself through each of these gates, it's like stripping her identity. Okay, so when she gets to the very bottom and she's at the actual last gates to get into the underworld, whatever being that was there at the gates ran to tell her sister, hey, your sister's at the gates. Her sister tells her to come in. Her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead, she tells her to come in, and as soon as she comes in, she strikes her sister down and hangs her body on a hook, leaving the world above barren and lifeless in her absence. Okay? Keep in mind, she brought her servant just in case things go wrong to go and tell her dad, hey, something went wrong, like, Inanna's down there and, we can't get her back. So she's dead. Okay. Her sister is like, fuck that. I'm killing you. Right. And again, killing not good, but in this sense, egoically, how the fuck are you going to go to your sister's gates after you got her husband killed and you're going down to the underworld and you already rule above the in the actual world, and you're going to go and try to rule the underworld with your above your sister whose husband that you killed, right? That's very egoic to me. Then after 3 days and 3 nights, right, the servant had left to go and tell her father Enki, like, hey, she's dead down there, you got to do something. So her father sent 2, they call them galas, and I want y'all to think about, remember I wanted to go into an episode on this at some point too, but 2 galas, they're demons, but they're being sent from heaven, right? Think about if there is a false heaven and a false ruler and a false god, right? They can have false angels, right? But they're not actually angels, because in reality, they're not from the highest of the highest source, right? If only pure streams of like consciousness can reside up there close to actual source, the monad, then these are entities made from a lower level god, if you will. And that's why they call them demons. But how are demons in heaven working for the god in this mythology? If not, they are not true angels. They are from a false realm or a false heaven, if you will, right? So her dad sent these 2 demons, these androgynous beings, and told those beings, go down there, go fuck with the Queen of Dead until she gives up and gives back Inanna, right? So these 2 beings, they go down there, they mess with her to where she can't think straight, or they said something along the lines of like her head was hurting and she like her head was spinning from these demons like messing with her over and over and over again. And she stops them and was like, what do you want? And they're like, we want Inanna to go back. And she's like, okay, that's fine, but somebody needs to come and take her place. So they practiced a magical intervention, and they were able to bring her body back to life, resurrect her. Okay, so she was resurrected after 3 days and 3 nights. 7 gates, 3 days and 3 nights, a resurrection happens. Okay, after she was stripped of her identity, was murdered, literally died to her identity. Okay, 3 days, 3 nights, then she resurrects. And then she has to further figure out who's going to go take her place, right? And further, she goes up after she resurrects, goes up to earth, sees that her partner of that time was enjoying her throne instead of mourning her like everybody else was on earth, because again, she was revered. She was the one of the most highest worship goddesses of that time, right? So she made him, Dumuzi, that was his name, she made him take her place in the underworld, again giving up the last bit of her identity that she knew or had, which was somebody that, she thought loved her, maybe, I guess, to go and take her place, right? So I condensed that story down a lot, but again, I just want y'all to kind of understand similarities. And I took notes through each of these stories to kind of tell y'all what I saw throughout it that I'm not saying during the story. So a sevenfold descent also can mean the seven archonic gates. I've talked a little bit about the archonic gates, but I'll get into it more in another episode. But I want to do a full episode on my zodiac wheel archonic gates one to kind of help people understand what it means to go through the archonic gates when you're coming into this world or attempting to leave this point of origin in this part of the universe, right? But again, sevenfold descent, seven gates that she had to go through in the underworld, seven archonic gates, okay? Each was stripping her of a power or an ornament, right? So remember I told you royalty is like that's their identity, is in their clothing and their jewelry, right? So she was stripping herself of her own identity through each of those gates, echoing soul fragmentation. So think Sophia, when she fell through, right, the dimension, and her soul was fragmented, okay? And it was loss of divine feminine sovereignty. So she lost, she was this amazing worshipped goddess, right? The feminine most worshipped goddess on earth. And she lost her life to that, because what I want to point out is her own ego. She had such a big ego, and even though she had all of this love and worship and adoration, it was still not enough for her. For her ego was so big, she was willing to strip herself of her identity, but didn't realize what it would mean for her in the end. Which again, that is kind of what it represents for us too. Remember in my Biofield episode, I talk about your 7 chakras. Okay? Think about that in terms of every time you hear 7 chakras, sevenfold descent, the 7 seals in the Bible. These things are all saying the same thing in different ways, right? And when you are descending or ascending through them, as you are in this human meat suit, again, something Mary Magdalene talks about, we'll talk about later, is being a human is not about ascending to another place. You are still a human in this earth. It is about descending into your soul every day and making sure that you are balanced with the feminine and the masculine within you. Descending and ascending through those 7 chakras, those 7 seals, those 7 lotuses, those 7 pools of energy within you. Okay. And then after she had to die to her own ego, right? Because she really thought she was about to go down there and her sister was just going to what? Give up being queen of the dead after she killed her own husband? No, bitch. Then she died and had to go get help from her father, right? Her father sent those demons, and those demons had to breathe life back into her. After 3 days and 3 nights, she was able to resurrect. Okay. So she resurrect, and to me, that is the same. Where else do we see resurrection? Mary Magdalene, Jesus Christ. Where else do we see, sevenfold descent? There's a couple other stories we'll get into, and you're gonna understand more and be like, oh my gosh. So the distortion was, though, over time, she became warped into just a goddess of like mere lust, right? They literally just said that she was like a goddess of violence, or think about lust and violence. What does that actually reframe as, right? Patriarchal control, right? Male centered control, because males are most about dominance, lust, violence, right? That is where it's centered around males. But the key that I again want to point out to y'all was the 7 layers of descent, her soul fragmentation, dying to her ego, resurrection, right? And then having a new self-found hood after that, right? She was very aware after that you cannot think that you are going to go and rule the underworld, because it's just not going to happen. And another sidebar that I didn't do on this one, but it's one that I could have done, is this is almost the same exact story of Persephone and Demeter, right? Where it represents her, Persephone, being taken down into the underworld, and then it caused the seasons to change. And when she comes back, that's when like spring happens, and she has to refine herself again. That is the same story. Her being taken down into the underworld, right? Losing everything that she knew, her soul fragmenting, the seasons changing, right? And then going back up to earth after that. So the same story again. Inanna and Persephone, very similar, right? But as I was doing the research on this, okay, this story has been obviously like researched throughout history because it's one of the oldest, goddess worships that have been written down, right, in history. So there's a lot of people that have had interpretations of their own, which is crazy because my brain was already flowing with all of these things that I just said. And then I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not, if we're all pulling from the same pools of consciousness, the more you know, and the more people that I find out that have been studying this for their whole lifetimes, really, they see the same things that I do. They're picking up on the same patterns, or I'm picking up on the same patterns they are, but we're all picking up on the same thing from the same field of consciousness, right? So whenever I went to, this is from worldhistory.org. This was some modern interpretations where it says Jungian view, not Jungian, sorry. Like Carl Jung, right? Is the archetypical myth of the journey within each individual that one must take to reach wholeness. Inanna was not a whole person until she appears before her darker half. So think about her sister representing the dark and the light. The dark was down in the underworld too. And I even think about that part representing your shadow self. Your ego is your shadow self, because I was just thinking ego, but I didn't think necessarily like that being her shadow, right? Her sister being that shadow, okay? Met her darker half, then she had to die and then return to life. At the poem's end, this poem asserts Inanna through her descent into the darkness and the shedding of her fragmentation, right, of her former self, and then a confrontation of her shadowed self and the death of who she was. That became the complete rebirth of an individual who is wholly aware. Okay, so think about that. She was too egoic. She had to die. She had to meet her other darker half after she descended and was fragmented to resurrect. This same story is an archetype that replays out within every single one of us as humans. And if you should be so lucky to awaken to this and take this journey, it is a journey that is lifelong, right? But once you become aware of it, it makes it easier to be okay to descend and come back when things happen to you, because you as a human are going to go through things. You're still alive. Shit is still going to happen. But that brings me to the next goddess that I want to talk about, which is Isis. So if you're anything like me, I had a deep obsession with ancient Egypt since I was younger. I had a lot of weird obsessions, okay? You can ask my mom or my brother. I literally had a file cabinet to where anything that was weird, like the Loch Ness Monster, I had literally like a small filing cabinet with different files within it. So I had a file on the Loch Ness Monster. I had a file on aliens. I had a file on ancient Egypt. I had a file on pirates and buried treasure. I had a file on the Bermuda Triangle. I had a file. I've been interested in some, esoteric type stuff since I was like, before I could even understand what I was searching, right? But ancient Egypt, I always gravitated towards it. And a small story that I'm going to share with you guys today that is personal to myself was the first time I ever did mushrooms, which it's been less than a handful of times in my whole adult life. I'm 28 years old, okay? So that's pretty good. Less than 5 times my whole adult life, right? I had did shrooms. I'm at my I'm at a family member's house, right? And I go to the bathroom. And if you've ever done shrooms and you look into a mirror, you know some crazy shit always happens when you look into a mirror when you're on shrooms, right? I go into the bathroom, I'm washing my hands, and as I look up at the mirror, my eyes go from just like, a set of two eyes, and then it goes into two more sets of eyes, and then two more sets of eyes, and then the whole mirror fills up where it's like it blacks out, or I black out, I guess. And it's like instantaneously I am fully immersed. Think of having, the onculus on, right? Is that what it's called? Whatever. The goggles where it's everything is like you're inside of another world, but it's like instantaneously I black out from the real world and I'm inside of another body. I don't see myself in a mirror, but I'm looking down and I'm like in the body. Like it's my perception that I am doing something. And as I'm looking around, like as I'm doing something at the table, I can see that it's very high ceilings and it's like stones, like very big stones around. And there's like only candle lights like lit in the room. And it's like a big ass, like, I don't know if it's wood or a stone table. I can't even remember, but there was tiny bowls on the table. And this sounds fucking crazy, you guys, but I really don't care because this is my experience and I'm just being vulnerable and telling y'all to lead into the story of Isis, how it was just so weird that it comes back around for me as an adult multiple times since childhood, ancient Egypt, right? I'm looking in these bowls and I come aware that I am doing some type of spell work that uses, like, one bowl has herbs, one bowl has like bones, like little, like I'm assuming bird bones, another bowl has like blood. And as I'm doing concocting some type of, potion, I get this overwhelming sense that whatever I'm doing, I know is fucked up. Like, I know it. Like, I can feel it, but I felt so angry. I couldn't tell you what I was angry about. I couldn't tell you the beginning or the end of that story or what it is. Maybe it'll come to me another day in another meditation or another altered state down the road. Who knows? But as I was doing that, I just felt like I am doing something so wrong at whatever I was concocting. And then it was like I snapped back into my body in this world, right? And I was just back in the bathroom in the mirror, and I was like, what the fuck did I just see? It was literally like a That's So Raven moment, but I was in another lifetime or in another body of somebody else, or it's me from a past life. I couldn't even tell you. All I know is I was very obsessed with ancient Egypt when I was little, and then, my teenagehood happened, then I became a mother very young. I completely forgot about all those obsessions until I started to kind of dabble back into them a little bit. And then I had that experience where I was like, oh my gosh, like maybe that's why I was so obsessed. Maybe I did have a past life there or something. But I was doing some type of work with my hands in these bowls, concocting something that was not good, right? So that kind of re-heightened my love for ancient Egypt. Not necessarily what I was doing, but like my awareness of these things might interrelate, right? So that brings me to Isis. Isis was from ancient Egypt, okay? And the earliest references of her is from 2500 to 2300 BCE. Her archetype or her nicknames was the goddess of magic, motherhood, resurrection, okay? And I didn't know this, but I didn't even know, I don't know why, but I've heard of Isis. I remember we went on a field trip in, it might have been elementary school. I really can't remember, but it was either elementary or middle school. And we went and saw the coffin of one of the pharaohs. They were bringing it to Dallas, which, colonization's so bad. But they brought it to Dallas and we got to go and see it. But I didn't know that Isis's mother was the goddess Nut, okay? And her father was the god Jeb, right? And Nut was the goddess of heaven, and Jeb was the father. He was earth, okay? So in this sense, earth was seen as a masculine attribute, but the heaven surrounding it was seen as a feminine attribute, right? So the story condensed down for Isis, though, is she was the sister and wife of Osiris. I know it sounds weird, but back in ancient times, a lot of weird shit was going on. The sister and wife of Osiris, but Osiris's brother and Isis's brother, Set, got jealous of them thriving. They helped the kingdom of Egypt thrive. So people really liked them and like worshiped them a lot. And there was just a lot of like good things happening in Egypt. And it was due to Isis and Osiris, right? And their unity. So because they had ruled Egypt. So one day, after gathering a group of angry Egyptians that were jealous, so Set had gathered this group of people that just pretty much no matter what was going right in the kingdom, they just hated their lives and wanted to complain or whatever. He gathered a group of them to try to basically come up with an idea of how they could trick Osiris and kill him. So he gathered these people up and they made a plan of, let's make this beautiful coffin and we'll bring it to a party and it'll be so pretty. We'll get people to go into it and we'll see if we can get Osiris to go in there. So they did. They brought it into a party and it was like, Osiris loved these grand, big parties and stuff. And it was just Set and Osiris there with like this group of guys, whatever, they're having this big ass party. And they were like, oh my gosh, like we should get in it just to see like how luxurious it is. Like the guys that knew what was going on, the Egyptian men that knew. And they all took turns getting into it. And then, Set was like, Osiris, like it's so, fit for you. You should go and see what it's like. So as soon as Osiris got into that coffin, the men charged the coffin, closed it, threw it into the Nile, and then he had died instantly when they threw it in there, right? A shorter, condensed version of this, though, to get to Isis, is Isis was able to find the coffin, right? There's a mini story about the coffin getting to some kingdom after he had died, like floating away, and it basically like grew into the ground, like it was on the ground but grew into a tree in a different kingdom, and Isis spent years trying to find it. She knows that it's there inside of this kingdom, and they hire her, whatever. Basically, she's able to get the coffin from this family, right? She gets the coffin and she wants to bring him back to Egypt. And on the way, Set finds out she's on the way back. Okay. Or Isis is on the way back with Osiris's body, and he knows that Isis is the mother of magic, right? Or the goddess of magic, and he knows that she definitely could bring him back to life. So he captures the coffin again and chops him up into 14 pieces. Okay. 14. We'll do some math in a second for y'all. And spreads them out throughout Egypt, so she couldn't find them, but Isis was determined. Okay. And she's magical. She knows, okay. She went throughout the kingdom and she was able to find all of the body parts besides one. And you want to know what body part she couldn't find? His dang-a-lang, his manhood. She could not find that dick. She couldn't find it. So she was able to still put his body back together, breathe life into him, and they were still able to conceive. Okay. And when they conceived, it was their son, Horus. Okay. Though Osiris could not live on forever, he became the lord of the underworld, and Isis raised their son Horus to one day avenge his father and restore balance. So conceiving that child was basically, getting the balance to come back into restoration after Set had thrown it off, okay, in Egypt. So obviously there's a lot of details in there, but what I want to speak about is the 14 pieces, right? When you have two people, if you both have 7 energy centers, 7 and 7 is 14, okay? And when you think about she had to die to what she had known, which was her connection to Osiris, and Osiris had to actually die, right, to death, and be resurrected by a feminine, right, by a femininity, archetype character. Okay. So again, we have the fragmentation of her husband's body. So even fragmentation in this sense was literal. He was cut up into 14 pieces. Okay. And she had to find him twice, put together his pieces, even if one was missing. Think about too, Inanna, she had to still give up one more piece of herself, which was the man she thought she was going to be with that was sitting on her throne happily, right? To really die and resurrect to the new being she was as a whole person. Okay. And the sacred union, right? So again, that was the feminine restoration though of Osiris. So Isis was restoring the masculine through her own feminine self. Okay. The sacred union was their child that restored balance, right? And again, that resurrection meant she knew that it was still not going to be the same. He still had to go and be the lord of the underworld after that. So it wasn't like he just got to do whatever, right? Him being chopped up into 14 pieces is still very significant because two people, both of their energy centers together combined is 14, right? And so when he was cut up and he was fragmentation still happening, right? To restore it, they had to come together and use magic for another resurrection, just like in Inanna's story, resurrection. And to become whole again, she had to have a child from both of them conceiving, which that had to have been through magical means because he didn't even have a dick, right? And that child was set to balance out what was going on in Egypt after they were both separated. So later on, the distortion of this happened because of Roman conquest, which is crazy because the Roman conquest also plays a part in Mary Magdalene's story too, even though these stories are far apart. Same situation happening again, where they tried to reduce Isis into just like another goddess story, right? And it was a very specific depiction of the Divine Mother. So for Isis being the Divine Mother, for them to try to just wash it away and just, try to say it's just another story or downplay it, I really do believe is because even if you only learned about Isis and Inanna, you would kind of be like, okay, that's a little weird. But then you hear about like Persephone, and then you're about to hear another story, and then you hear Mary Magdalene. Something's going on psychologically, spiritually with the divine feminine and divine masculine that have to do with each other within each of us as individuals, even if we don't perceive it while we're reading these stories by themselves. When you look at them in totality, which is why I think so many patriarchal constructs and rulers have tried so hard to downplay women in all these stories, did not want anybody to thread this shit together. Okay. So also, if you ever want to go and look into like what Isis looked like, she was the one that had the solar disk on her head, and she's mentioned in the pyramid text, and those were from 2350 to 2100 BCE. And there was also several temples dedicated specifically to Isis in Alexandria. And think about the Library of Alexandria, how much knowledge and ancient Egyptian knowledge dating back to ancient Mesopotamia was there before it was burned down during the Roman conquests. Okay? And why would the Romans give so... If any regime, this applies today, gives a fuck about taking away history, there was something about that history that they do not want people to be educated on, okay? Because education can change timelines, right? The more aware people are, the more people can change their views and the way in which the world goes, okay? And their choices and just what regimes we allow in power, or us as humans, if we come together or don't come together, the less educated we are, the more separate we are, the harder it is for us to come together, okay? So keep that in mind. Then, as I was going down this, I found out about the goddess Nut, and I kind of want to tell that story again because it says some of the same things. So Nut is Isis's mother. So let's get into Nut and kind of just how she was the same story that her daughter ended up replaying out, but in a different way. So you can learn about Nut actually in the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. And what's crazy is that I have been reading this book. I'm not super far into it just because I've been trying to do this freaking episode so many times. But I've been reading this book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I want to kind of show y'all a couple cool ass pictures that are in here. This book talks about literally any esoteric or religious or spiritual teachings that you've ever thought about. It's in here. Okay. There's so many cool things. So let me show y'all. This is the Rosicrucian crucifixion, right? And it talks about this in depth. This is, oh, look at this one. This one's cool as fuck. For those of you who can't see it, it literally looks like a map of the heavens and then a map of the dimensions within Earth. And that is from the Rosicrucian Alchemical Formula. So again, this book is called The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And then this is from the Bimbine Table of Isis. I want y'all to see that too. Again, these are depictions that are in the actual pyramids themselves. This one is Hermes standing on the back of Typhoon. It looks like a fucking dragon. It is a dragon. And then the Lucianian mysteries. This is an initiation ceremony where it looks like an angel coming down to give a light to the people that are being initiated into it. So this book is cool as fuck. Again, I am probably 1/4 of the way through it, but the way in which it explains stuff that like I'm right here, right? The way in which it explains stuff, and so many of these things have the same type of, even if they're practicing different rites, different ceremonies, again, it has to do with masculinity and femininity and bringing light to your shadow self. Okay, yin yang. That's the point we're going to keep getting to in this. But the sky goddess Nut, you can learn more about her in the Rosicrucian Museum, but she's also in the pyramid text from 2400 to 2300 BCE. And she's carved into the royal tombs, and she is the one that is depicted as the body of, it looks like a woman that's bent over the earth with stars inside of her body because she is the goddess of heaven. So this is the condensed version of her story. It says, before the world was ordered, there was only darkness and chaos. Out of that void came two powerful beings, Jeb the earth and Nut the sky. They loved one another so deeply that they clung together in an eternal embrace, so close that nothing could exist between them. But the god Shu, the lord of air, was commanded by the creator, again, a creator above the heavens, a creator above the earth, a creator above all of this, okay? Commanded the god Shu, right, to separate them so that life could grow. With all his strength, Shu lifted Nut high above Jeb. She arched her body over him, her star-studded skin becoming the heavens. Every evening, which also there's depictions of this, where when you look at the Milky Way in like a really good telescope, it literally looks like a body over that, and it's the same depiction of Nut being over the earth, the Milky Way, right? Every evening, Nut swallowed the sun, carrying it through her body. Every morning, she gave birth to it, bringing it right back to the world. Nut also longed to be a mother, but the sun god, Ra, grew jealous. He cursed her, declaring she would not bear children on any day of the year. Yet, Nut was clever. She sought help from Thoth, the god of wisdom. and think about this too. So in this sense, Thoth was seen as a masculine of wisdom, okay? But all of these gods are separate, but they're not the creator source. Keep that in mind. Through trickery and a game of dice with the moon, again, personification of a planet, that pops up in Gnosticism, right? The planet's being personified by a specific archon. Thoth won extra pieces of time and created 5 days hidden outside of the normal calendar. So it went from 360 to 365 days. On those days, Nut gave birth to her other children, her divine children, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nefertiti's, and Horus the Elder, god and goddesses who would shape the face of Egypt in the world. Thus, Nut, the great mother, became an eternal protector of the living and the dead. Every night, the stars shone across her body, reminding all beings that they rested under the embrace of the sky mother. Okay, so even though the story is a little bit different and it doesn't necessarily have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it doesn't necessarily have the numbers that you see in there. She had 5 children, and then plus her and Jeb, right? That's 7. Okay. The note of similarities between Sophia and Newt, though, is fragmentation of self. So the shadow and light. Think about, she was the shadow, the darkness of the heavens, and he was the light of earth, right? They were separated, and then came a physical plane, and she was also a feminine representation of heaven. So again, think about Sophia being the feminine womb of this point of origin, maybe in our specific universe, especially if there's multiverses, right? So she also, to become whole, gave birth to children, which, think about Sophia, she wanted to create, and within that, she was fragmented and birthed a child, okay? But the son was jealous, and Yaldabaoth, her son, Sophia's son, was jealous. And then Newt had 5 more children, right? To save the world, because, you know, so think about when Sophia, later on in emanationism, she had her own daughter that pretty much, there was one archon that stood up against Yaldabaoth when they realized that Sophia was something above them even, and that source had to be above her, which I believe is the same archetype of Archangel Michael, because some of these angels too, these archangels, are actually fallen angels that represent these personified planets. So think dimension spaces that are run by archons are the same thing as these planets, but also these archangels that are not from source. They're from a lower level source. And there was one specific one that overcame it, that saw Sophia and Sophia's daughter when they had reached out to explain, not even explain, just show a sense of divineness to Yaldabaoth when he said, reach out and, tell me I'm not God if I'm not God, very egoic. And when Sophia did that, only one archon turned away, and the daughter was able to turn him into an actual angelic presence, which I believe, we'll get into this another day when I do get into the zodiac wheel, but Archangel Michael would be at the end, right? Would be by Saturn or Kronos, or there's so many, black cube worship. We'll get into that later on too when I do that episode, but it just makes so much sense that these same archetypes have different names. Okay. But again, the description of her, one more thing that I want to say though before I move on to the description, is it was birthing, resurrection, or birthing, death, and resurrection, right? So birthing, she birthed new beings, right? Well, birthing themselves into the world together out of, they literally say the word primordial, which they came out of the primordial waters, Newt and Jeb, right? And primordial is literal plasma. Again, think plasma membranes. It's hard to explain, but I know it. I can just understand what I'm saying, but if you don't understand it, just look up like articles about the universe and plasma, watch videos about it on YouTube, and you'll kind of understand what I'm saying when I say every time they say primordial waters in any esoteric sense, it is about plasma and beings coming through plasma, okay? But the heavens is the divine emanation of a feminine, okay? The description, though, is that her body, again, was a protective canopy, which is the woman that's over her husband, Jeb, and her body was covered in stars. And also, she is depicted, too, carrying the purse. Or it looks like an ankh, or sometimes it looks like a purse, which is crazy because that can represent multiple other things. But they talk about that purse could have held multiple things. One, knowledge, or two, think about like mushrooms or certain herbs that when you would take them, okay, they would allow you to see this, because Gnostics, they had their own rituals too, just like ancient Egyptians did too. So after I kind of learned about all of that, I kind of was like, okay, this kind of makes sense in the terms of there's a masculine and a feminine. You have to die to your ego. Your ego is your shadow side, but it's not dying to it. It's really integrating it, because I used to think becoming love and light, new age spirituality bullshit, that I really had to, there's levels to becoming, spiritually aware. And one of the first initiatory levels is thinking that you are only going to be love and light. That's bullshit. Thinking that your ego will die infinitely. No. Every day you have to kind of become aware of your ego and the ways in which your ego tries to protect you, but you have to let your ego know the ego is not in control. And that is something I'm working on embodying personally in my own self, in my own life, in my own things that I have going on, right? Whether it's my motherhood, my any relationships, whether family, romantic, whatever. I want to be aware of when my ego is trying to be in the driver's seat, because if you live like that, that is going to call out for certain things to happen to you over and over again until you learn the lesson of you are safe, you are okay, you are not a problem to be solved, right? You are a soul to be loved, and that means loving your whole self, your masculine and your feminine side, and bringing them together, your shadow together with your light. I said this in a TikTok of mine the other day. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And boy, oh fucking boy, did that hit my soul at its core. People think I'm such in la la land, or I like to talk about this because of this or that. Babe, it took me wanting to kill myself, really wanting to kill myself, before I literally sat there and meditated for so long that something came through that was not me, but is something above me, because the ways in which it was able to calm me down when I have struggled with mental health issues since I was a young child, right? I cannot explain it to you other than there is something out there, and you have to become the observer of your thoughts. And the more ways that you can calm your brain down, whether through meditation and breath work simultaneously, for me, I was able to put myself in an altered state to receive messages from something that it sounds like it's your voice, but it's telling you things that you wouldn't say to yourself in a good way. There's also things that try to come into your streams of consciousness, think archonic attachments, right? That will try to say things to you where you have to become the observer of those thoughts to make sure that you do not follow them along and listen to them. Okay. So for me, understanding that it took so much darkness for me to become so aware of my light, right? I did not realize how much I have so much love to give, but I had no boundaries. And I really hated certain parts of myself and hated this. Learning to love that shadow, that side of me, and my light at the same time was the only way I stopped having suicidal ideation thoughts. Like, I really have not had a season of depression. Right now, I'm in a tough time in life, okay? Perceived. I don't care anymore because I know my mission on this earth. I really do. And my mission, especially because I'm an astrology girly and I read my birth chart to bits and pieces, broke it down in so many ways, hundreds of times at this point. I know my journey is I'm supposed to be here to talk about taboo stuff. I love to talk. I'm a yapper. I love to listen about taboo stuff. I love to research taboo stuff in my free time for free. So why the fuck should I not speak about it? And anytime I talk to other people about this and I make these connections, people are like, hey, you should make a podcast. And now I am. And here I am. But that only came from me. Everybody has different gifts that they come into this world with, right? And I truly feel like sometimes those gifts stay locked inside of you or lay dormant, or you don't really, self actualize those gifts until you start to love that shadow, because that shadow is still sitting there in the back of your subconscious. Your ego is still in the driver's seat. Yeah, and you're just going through life day to day, not knowing why things keep happening to you. I know why things keep happening to me, but it's now about me embodying the work that it takes to actually feel my feelings and work through them instead of intellectualizing them. Okay. So when I started to understand that and I started to do my research after I started to have these crazy meditations happen where this voice was coming through, and I started to do chakra meditations, that brought me to Shakti. Okay. So I want to get into Shakti's story because she has to do with the chakras. So Shakti is from like Hindu mythology, right? And she was the great divine mother, or the universal mother in power. And she had other, I want to say, just like ways in which she was incarnated in this world, or the ways in which, so let's say like Sophia, was representative through Mary Magdalene, which we'll get into that in a little bit later. But she was also, for Shakti, was the goddess Parvati, right? Who was considered the manifestation of Shakti, okay? And then she had a male counterpart, Shiva. So Shiva and Shakti, Shiva the male and Shakti the female. And his incarnation was Purusha, Okay. Purusha is pure consciousness, right? Which creates universes through the female creative energy of Shakti. So you can have matter, but you don't have this. Think about Sophia embedding herself into matter to make it consciously aware, right? You can have matter, but there is energy inside of matter, even scientifically, right? Think about biophotons. They are particles of light that they used to think 99% of it was just trash, DNA or trash, whatever, just emptiness, actually carries information. That information is through the feminine. Okay. So the matter is from the man, and then the actual energy, the spiritual energy is through the woman, the womb in, right? So think about that. So this mythology dates back to 3300 BCE through 1300 BCE, and this story, condensed down a lot just for the sake of this episode, because I want to get into Mary Magdalene after this, is in the beginning there was boundless cosmic energy, plasma, the divine feminine known as Shakti. She's not just a goddess, but the very force of creation, the power dynamic behind all gods and all life. When the universe was threatened by demons, literally think about K-pop demon hunters. I made a whole TikTok about this, that neither gods nor men could defeat, the deities combined their energies. From their joined radiance emerged Shakti in her fierce form as Durga, riding a lion. So this is another incarnation in this lifetime where she was, for this fight specifically, riding a lion and armed with many weapons. That's also how she's depicted. She battled the great demon Mahishasura for 9 days and nights, finally defeating him, restoring balance to the world. So again, she had to fight demons, the feminine. So think about Sophia, who created the demiurge by default, by yearning to create without her divine counterpart, without her masculine, created a faulty masculine figure, Yaldabaoth, through the demiurge, right? Who then created archons, which are like the demons of this universe. These invisible entities that are streams of consciousness, because we're in a battle for our consciousness. Again, I want y'all to remember that. This is not, we're not just talking about just specific physical figures. We're in a battle for consciousness. If you've got a demon and an angel on your shoulder, you are the God in between, making these decisions of which ones you want to tap into. Okay. And this world will do everything in its fucking power to get you to forget that that's what this is about. So if you are falling for any type of propaganda or any type of separation that has to do with whether it's race, sex, this is why I want to make this very apparent in this episode. When I'm talking about femininity, I'm talking about within all of us, right? Because in the sense of like statistics with women, the last year was the lowest birth rate. Women are now leading in divorces. Women now have more homes as single women or single mothers than men do. Women are giving up on men, not because men are not worthy or whatever, that men inherently are all bad, but the system at whole, this beast that runs this fucking archonic control of this matrix, right, have made men separate themselves from their own femininity. Men think it is gay to have their own emotions. Men think it is gay to, and again, even men being fearful of being called gay, right? Unless you really are sleeping with a man, babe, why do you care if somebody calls you gay? It should not be that fucking serious, right? We as women have more fluidity, so it's not as hard. We can talk about our feelings. Men have been separated from their femininity. Men kill themselves at more rates, because even if they're more violent towards women and to each other, when they are violent, they are more violent even to themselves when they commit violent acts. Even though women attempt suicide more often, men get the job done of killing themselves because they are still more violent than women are, right? So think about that in terms of women are separating themselves because the men have also, when they forgot about their femininity, are now weaponizing women's femininity against them and not honoring it within the woman, and then separating it from themselves and not understanding why no woman wants to be with them. It's because you forgot who you are. So even with Shiva and Shakti, literally the masculine gods were inert without the feminine energy. So think about even Sophia, Adam and Eve were inert until Sophia embedded the spiritual inside of the matter, inside of the physical. Okay. So Shiva and Shakti are the balance of the masculine and feminine in the polarity, right? And they talk about this in Hindu beliefs. Okay. It's from the Kundalini of the 7 chakras. Now, Kundalini has been weaponized so much throughout New Age spirituality. So I want everyone to be very careful. You don't just rise into Christ consciousness and you're perfect, right? Rising into Christ consciousness literally takes daily daily work, right? Especially if you're someone that's gone through trauma, okay? And especially in this fucked up beast of a system that we are being faced with every day in the palm of our hands looking at our phones. This is a daily thing. This is a lifelong thing, okay? That you will work towards. Healing is not linear, it is fucking cyclical, okay? So I want to also focus on, before we get into Mary Magdalene, in Hindu practices, when they talk about the chakras, they talk about them as the lotuses over the lotus, or think energy pools over the spinal cord, along with Shakti. So Shakti, the feminine, is at the bottom. The womb, think the root. She's at the bottom, or it's at the bottom, okay? And then there is a spiral column that rises to meet Shiva at the top. Think source, the monad, how it refers to itself as a masculine. So your root at the bottom towards the womb, right? Where you pick up energy from the earth, right? Think Mother Earth, think Mother Nature, think, okay? This is a continuous process of your transformation into your higher self, bringing in greater awareness of being, truth, and realization of the unity of Shiva and Shakti. And there cannot be one without the other. As a man or a woman, you do not have a feminine side without a masculine side, or a masculine side without a feminine side, whichever way you want to put it. You can't have one without the other. You are both. You are both yin and yang. And reaching your Shiva and Shakti, which again is that constant flow, if you are able, like in my biofield episode, to unblock each 7 seal, 7 chakra, overcome 7 archonic influences, you have you as the human are the conduit, and then you become an open channel for source. Source will speak to you like it does through me, not because I'm special, and not because there might be some months of my life that I am more blocked off from source than not. Doesn't mean that I don't have triggers. It doesn't mean that, especially now, learning through my triggers and understanding my triggers are showing me where energy is building up to block me, or where I haven't fully unblocked XYZ from whatever trauma, whatever belief, whatever generational perceived curse has been imposed upon my own DNA or my own thought processes. Because becoming like Christ means unblocking all of those and living that daily. People saying that they have awakened to Christ consciousness, I genuinely want you to understand, awakening to Christ consciousness means you are above dualism. And that is something that is so hard for me, especially being in this fucking world, knowing that there is so much political violence going on, physical violence going on, sexual violence going on, and the ways in which this world, this beast of a system, will get you to find a way to build yourself to be separate, when in reality it really is all of us versus these top 1% of rulers, not just rich fucking, trillionaires that we don't know by name, but like I said in a TikTok of mine, these people who, Catherine Austin Fitz, she speaks about this. If you haven't looked into her, go and look into her. She speaks about intergenerational pools of wealth run by families who are deeply involved in occult practices that are involved with interdimensional demonic intelligence, aka archons. They will give them money, they will give them worldly values of this world, they will give them technology, they will give them this secrets, they can spy, they can. I also said on my TikTok, it's like in The Princess and the Frog, when the shadow man sends out those spirits, those demons, to go and try to find somebody, and they can go and find them for them. That archons can be used consciously to bring information to people, okay, or to bring information about how to make certain things or do certain things. Okay, I want y'all to understand, when you block any of these, if you don't work through your trauma and you don't try to become the most rooted, loving, authentic version of yourself daily, you are being blocked somewhere within your system, in your chakra system. And when you talk about Christ, again, Mary Magdalene, you guys, she was the one who brought me back to being mystified by Jesus and understanding Christ's teachings. Not being a Christian, but being like Christ is the point of Jesus himself. Like Buddha did not want you to worship Buddha. He wanted you to become a Buddha yourself. Because even when it talks about Christ, becoming Christed is something that people will say that this is heretical, and I don't give a fuck, because I've done years worth of extensive research into this. Christing yourselves means fully unblocking those 7 energy centers and realizing you are not separate from the next person. We are all little mini gods walking around, and whatever streams of consciousness we tap up into, angel or demon, right, depends on what we've worked through. Becoming Christ consciousness, right? Becoming Christed yourself is not about ascending out into another dimension. It is about descending into your heart daily. And that is what Mary Magdalene said. And I'm going to get into Mary Magdalene right now and just a little bit of her story and what she represents. But I want to get into what she specifically said in her own gospel in the Gnostic text. This is the gospel of Mary Magdalene. I'm going to read a part of it to you. And then we're going to get into what Mary calls the 7 powers of the ego. Mary says sin is not real, ignorance is. And I want everyone to understand what that fucking means. So if you were not grown up in the church at all, not religious, awareness at all of Jesus Christ's story, I want to tell y'all about Mary Magdalene's story specifically with Jesus' story alongside it, right? So Jesus had met Mary before he met any of the other disciples, okay? So keep that in mind as we talk, and why they were giving Peter the authority of the church through a patriarchal lens instead of Mary. Questions to keep in your head, because the reason why they gave Peter authority is because Peter saw Jesus after he resurrected out of all the disciples. But was he the first one to see Jesus after he resurrected? Let's look. So he met Mary before he met any of the disciples. Upon meeting Mary, he had what they said in the biblical account was rid her of 7 demons. And then they just kind of move past that quickly and go on to more of Jesus' story, okay? But Mary had traveled with Jesus. She listened to his teachings. She even financially helped support Jesus throughout his mission. And then when Jesus was put up on the cross, all the other disciples fled, all of them, because they were mortified that if a man that is truly God's son can, be incarnated on this earth and be crucified in a horrific way, what are the Romans going to do to us? What will the Jews say about us if we keep talking about this, right? So Mary was the only one that stayed while he was being crucified. The only one that stayed, because it took time to make sure that he was dead. They had to literally make sure that he was dead. This is where it gets dicey for some people, because some people don't believe in the resurrection story. But I want you to know, again, this is not the first time that there's a resurrection story. There's a lot of occult knowledge, and it has to do with biofields, energetic, Reiki understanding. Mary Magdalene, even there's all kinds of, historical documents that you can go and look through that talk about Jesus's mother being a practicing Essene, and that she was preparing for an angelic inception. Okay. It didn't just happen to her miraculously without her knowing. Okay. And on top of Mary Magdalene, she was a archetype of a priestess. Okay. Because then what happened when Jesus went to the tomb? She was there tending to his tomb, anointing him with sacred oils. Anointing him with sacred oils. If somebody is dead and you know that they're dead, and if Mary did not believe that he was going to come back, truly, why would she be anointing him with sacred oils? And sacred oils, I want y'all to understand, if everything is frequency, even oils, think frankincense and myrrh when they were given to Jesus when he was a baby. Those are protective herbs and oils. Mary Magdalene was doing the same thing while he was dead. Okay? She, on the third day, was the first to go in there. The tomb was rolled away. She went in there. She couldn't see him. He was nowhere to be found. Then all of a sudden somebody spoke to her, and she didn't even know it was Jesus at first until he said her nickname, which is Kononos, which it's like, you not being able to see that that's your man, but then him saying your nickname, and like, it's him. Like if somebody got in a really bad car accident and you couldn't tell what their face, who they were, and then they said your nickname, you would know that it was them. And that's when she like fell and like wept onto him. You know what I'm saying? Because she was the first to see Jesus Christ resurrect. Even the Pope that tried to say she was just a prostitute, which we'll get into that in a second, later on was rescinded by another Pope, saying there's no historical context in which she was just a prostitute, that 7 demons came out of her. She actually played a large role. And in fact, she was the disciple to the disciples. Why is that part so many Christian women that I know do not even question that part of the story? Don't even, let alone look outside of the Bible and look at all these places and then come back to the Bible and then put together these pieces of seeing what I see. Okay. And not to say that everybody has to see the Bible the same way that I do, but the Bible is open to interpretation. And there's plenty of people that have looked at occult practices as a whole, religious and spiritual practice as a whole, and then the esoteric teachings that are kept behind closed doors, right? Including in the Nag Hammadi, where they talked about the the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the secret teachings of John, right? Where Jesus was talking to parables to majority of all the disciples and to all of the public, but to these few people who understood stuff, Jesus spoke very plainly. And in Mary's gospel, the disciples literally tell her, we know Jesus was alone with you more than the rest. What did he tell you that he did not tell us? And she explains it to them. So I want to read y'all quickly the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a specific portion of it. And if you have any questions about any of the Gnostic teachings, I want you to know, because I know there's some people in here that are intellectuals, and they, especially if you are biblically intellectual and you want to know, like, where does she think these books and these writings are true? I want you to hear how many actual historians and educators that even are Christian themselves have studied the Nag Hammadi and have opened their brain up and that are not so rigid to religious dogma that they think that Christianity was one set way. So before I read Mary Magdalene's, I want y'all to understand, you can go and read the Nag Hammadi, but I want y'all to also know right now, these are some actual educators and people that have studied the Nag Hammadi in a actual historically accurate sense, okay? A couple of them, Karen L. King, she's from Harvard Divinity School. She's the author of the Gospel of Mary of Magdala, Jesus and the First Woman Apostle, right? She pretty much argues that it shows early Christian diversity and presents Mary as a central leader. Of course, it's women doing this research, finding out, hey, she's been misrepresented a lot. Mary actually was a very main focal point of the story that's been taken out, okay? Elaine Pagels, my favorite. You can go and watch her. She has a YouTube video, and I'm pretty sure it was from the Interfaith Conference, but she's from Princeton University, and she wrote the Gnostic Gospels in 1979, and she discusses Mary Magdalene's gospel within broader struggles between Orthodox and heretical Christianities, because they, especially after the Romans took over all this type of shit, when they were trying to, do the Council of Nicaea, they deemed everything heretical if it was not their specific doctrine. And what is their doctrine? Who was overseeing their doctrine? Only male figures. Go fucking figure, right? And she also talks about the Gospel of Thomas and Philip and how there was evidence that reaffirmed what Mary Magdalene's Gospel said. So it wasn't just Mary Magdalene's Gospel by itself. Also, there was a fragment of Mary Magdalene's Gospel that was floating around. I want to say, it was Greek fragments already in circulation being copied by late 100 CE. So the regular canonical texts were written around 100 CE. So there was already fragments, because keep in mind, a lot of stories in the Bible were not written down at first. They were orally passed down. So many religious and esoteric teachings are orally passed down, right? But when they started to write stuff down at the same time of, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, that was at the same time that Mary Magdalene's gospel was already going around. And then it was reaffirmed later on in the Nag Hammadi when they found it, the full text, these Coptic texts, okay? So those are just a couple of people that you can go and look into. And I think another one was Bart D. Emin of University of North Carolina, where he explains the texts like Mary show alternate Christianities that didn't make it into the canon. Because again, it didn't fit the agenda of control, that you have to worship a God outside of you and think that Jesus just died for your sins, and that sin, this is my problem. Those who think they are absolved of inner workings because they believe in a Jesus or a God outside of themselves will truly never benefit humanity itself or themselves or family itself, because you have not done the inner work and you think you can just religiously bypass, when in reality, trauma dives into DNA and affects generations later, because you think you are absolved, or you can just pray that trauma to go away. Can prayer help? Yes, but prayer without divine action truly is dead. Nothing that you will ever pray for will come into fruition or stay in fruition for you or truly be fulfilling for you if you have not done the inner workings of what Jesus was saying in totality first, okay? And the fact that they took away Mary's part in all of this shows, who is this upholding? Who is this uplifting? Who is this attempting to uplift? Those in power and control that want you to think God is outside of you. Mary Magdalene, as you're about to hear, will tell you, God is not outside of you. God is within. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So let's get into Mary Magdalene's gospel. It starts off, I'm starting off personally on chapter 5, and there were some pages missing from this, which makes me sad because there's one part I really wish that we could have heard everything that Jesus said to her, because it's about how we have visions. And oh, is that not the most mystical shit ever? Jesus talking about visions and not just saying that like it was for himself, talking about how humans can have visions themselves. It says, so this is after Jesus departed, okay? It says, but they were grieved. They wept greatly, saying, how shall we go to the Gentiles and preach the gospel of the kingdom of the Son of Man? If they did not spare him, how will they spare us? Then Mary stood up, greeted them all, and said to her brethren, do not weep, do not grieve, nor be irresolute, for his grace will be entirely with you and will protect you. But rather, let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us and made us into men. When Mary said this, she turned their hearts to the good, and they began to discuss the words of the Savior. Peter said to Mary, sister. So listen to how this is how men treat women, is they want a woman's spiritual insights, but then how they will turn it to dogma or discard it whenever it doesn't fit their personal egotistical views of it. Okay. So this is how he starts off. Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Tell us the words of the Savior, which you remember, which you know, but we do not, nor have we heard them. Mary answered and said, what is hidden from you, I will proclaim to you. And she began to speak to them these words. She said, I saw the Lord in a vision, and I said to him, Lord, I saw you today in a vision. He answered and said to me, blessed are you that did not waver at the sight of me, for where the mind is, there is treasure. That has so many, and it gives me the chills. So many interpretations that you can look at that in a lens of like how we can have visions and how we can have insight and how we can see things and use our brains power more than we are allowed to know or taught or truly are understood, just from a plain beginner's perspective, right? It says, I said to him, Lord, how does he who sees the vision see it? Through the soul or through the spirit? The Savior answered and said, he does not see through the soul nor through the spirit, but the mind that is in between the two, that is what sees the vision, and it is, and then it goes ... because pages 11 through 14 are missing in the manuscript, right? So, but keep in mind, Jesus himself said that you don't see it through the spirit or the soul, but you see it through the mind that is between the two. So think about your sixth chakra before you get up to the crown, your inner vision. That is how you can have visions or see Jesus or see a loved one right after they passed, or we all can have these inner visions of good or bad, right? Or think about like that's a Raven moments, vision of the actual future, visions of the past. For me, remember I talked about my ancient Egyptian experience. It's through your pineal gland. You can go and look into that, and so many cool things in ancient Egypt that represent that, and how it looks like the bird when you cut the brain in half and the third eye looks like that, and how birds are frequencies, and it's a high frequency that once you reach that frequency, you're able to have more visions, right? And the more you work through your blockages and that energy can free flow up to here, at least, you can attempt to pull through to source. But being in tune with source is very hard when you are in this matrix system. It is something I still struggle with. I'm just giving you what I know, okay? So then it goes on. Now we're to chapter 8, verse 10. And Desire said, I did not see you descending, but now I see you ascending. Why do you lie, since you belong to me? The soul answered and said, I saw you. You did not see me, nor recognize me. I served you as a garment, and you did not know me. When it said this, the soul went away rejoicing greatly. Again, it came to the third power, which is called ignorance. The power questioned the soul, saying, where are you going? In wickedness are you bound? But you are bound. Do not judge. And the soul said, why do you judge me, although I have not judged? I was bound, though I have not bound. I was not recognized, but I have recognized that all that is being dissolved, both the earthly things and the heavenly. When the soul had overcome the third power, it went upwards and saw the fourth power, which took 7 forms. This is where I want y'all to lock the fuck in. Tune in. The first form is darkness, the second desire, the third is ignorance, the fourth is excitement of death, the fifth is kingdom of flesh, the sixth is foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the seventh is wrathful wisdom. These are the 7 powers of wrath. They asked the soul, whence do you come, slayer of men, or where are you going, conqueror of space? The soul answered and said, what binds me has been slain, what turns me about has been overcome, and my desire has ended, and my ignorance has died. Because this is how you pass through these archonic gates, is really what is being explained to Mary right here. In an aeon, remember aeons, aeonic or archonic. Aeonic is the streams of consciousness that are connected to source. Archonic is streams of consciousness connected to the demiurge, the false creator, the false matrix, if you will. It says, in an aeon I was released from a world, and in a type from a type, and from the fetter of oblivion, which is transient. From this time on, I will attain the rest of time, of the season, of the aeon, in silence. Remember when I said also that the monad is nirvana? It is all that is. It is still. It is pure knowing. It is pure oneness. It is those moments of which you were having that out of body experience where it's like, you know, you can't even explain it with words. That is source, right? So to end it, it says, when Mary said this, she fell silent, since it was at this point the Savior had spoken with her. So keep in mind, this is also your spirit. When your spirit tells you, hey, stop talking, don't reveal that information to that person, don't take that turn today, don't go to this place today, or hey, go and talk to this person, call this person today. That is your spirit that is connected to all that is, tapping into you, telling you, follow this. There's streams of consciousness you can follow. You just have to have discernment to understand which one to do so, okay? It says, when Mary had, so the Savior spoken with her, but Andrew answered and said to the brethren, say what you wish about what she has said. I at least do not believe that the Savior said this, for certainly these teachings are strange ideas. Peter answered and spoke concerning these same things. He questioned them about the Savior. Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? Are we to turn about and all listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? Such an egotistical fucking male thing. Also, Peter was an Aries, bro. Just very hard-headed, fiery, whatever. Then Levi answered and said to Peter, Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. That motherfucker's a fire sign, and I will also add in the part about the zodiac wheel when it comes to the archonic wheel too, about the disciples too. Because isn't it crazy that Jesus walked the full zodiac? He walked the full zodiac, Aries to Pisces. Bloop. It says, Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. Now I see you contending against the woman like the adversaries. Pretty much saying, Peter, pipe down. You sound like the Pharisees. But if the Savior made her worthy, who are you indeed to reject her? Surely the Savior knows her well. That is why he loved her more than us. Rather let us be ashamed and put on the perfect man and separate as he commanded us and preach the gospel, not laying down any other rule or law beyond what the Savior has said. And when they heard this, they began to go forth and proclaim and preach. What the fuck does that mean, right? Especially for those of you that did grow up in the church, and especially for those of you who are looking into Mary Magdalene. And what does this mean for you in your own personal day-to-day life? I want to intertwine this for y'all to understanding your biofield, okay? If your chakras are interpenetrated in what anchor your biofields in you, right? And wherever you have energetic blockages, they are present in your biofields. Jesus ridding Mary of 7 demons at the beginning was really him Christing her. He was opening up each of her 7 chakras to allow her to be Christed, because your crown, think Jesus being the crown king, think them putting thorns on his head to mentally fuck with the thought of the crown, cutting him off from source, right? Damaging his crown chakra. Jesus was Christing Mary Magdalene. And what does that mean for you or me when we're talking about biofield sovereignty or biofield healing, right? When Mary talks about the descent, right? Well, when Mary Magdalene talks about getting rid of these 7 demons and they surpass it, really it is about the descent through hell back up to becoming Christed yourself. And how does that work? The book I'm reading right now, The Energy Codes, she talks about you live in 2 ways: your protective personality, your ego, or your soulful self. Knowing who you are, knowing that you are source itself in this meat suit. You are a spiritual being having a spiritual experience, but this is your avatar that you have, right? And this avatar does not know the difference between you thinking something negative about yourself or something negative actually happening to you. So your thoughts play a role on your physical body, on your biofield, okay? So to clear it, right, what Jesus did for her was he cleared each of those energy centers. And I want to walk y'all through the 7 energy centers and how they represent those 7 powers of wrath, right? Or the 7 powers of ego, if you will, and how to cleanse them yourself, but what Jesus had said and kind of what Mary Magdalene's gospel had said too. So I want to get into the 7 powers step by step. And to me, this is what I would call the biofield clearing technique. Okay. Understanding that each of these relates to a chakra has helped my brain really lock in all this information more than anything I've done before. The first power that they talk about is darkness. So the obstacle of darkness would be a primal fog. These are your NPCs, the people who are truly not even aware that there's a spiritual battle going on for your consciousness, really. You are in complete separation from source. You are lost in unconsciousness. You truly aren't even consciously aware of what this is, okay? So the energy center that this would represent is your root chakra, survival and fear or anxiety, okay? The liberation from it, though, the quote that in Mary Magdalene's gospel was, "You did not see me, nor did you know me," okay? And when Jesus was healing Mary, okay, he ignited Mary's root by showing her she comes from divine light, not just physical matter. Think about Sophia, the divine spark of spirit. If Gnostics believe we are all divine sparks of life, okay, you just have to awaken by becoming aware of what you are, having awareness daily, integrating that knowledge and checking yourself, keeping yourself in balance through your ego and through your soul of where you see your ego's trying to overtake your soul, okay? So he cleared her fear-based, think archonic control. He cleared it. So that's your root, is darkness, okay? The second one is desire. So desire, the obstacle would be craving or attachment to the material, clinging to possessions, just anything material. Think about people in the world that are so hyper fixated on their possessions, right? Or even your relationship as an identity, something I've had to work on, or clinging onto your own personal pleasures and not having the self-awareness to make sure that you have a healthy boundary with your pleasures, right? And that energy center is your sacral chakra. So think that's the seat of appetite, your sexuality and longing. That is your womb. That is that seat of where your desire will come from, okay? Think when you desire somebody or you desire a thing, that is your sacral chakra. The liberation was when the soul had said, "What bonds me has been slain," okay? But when Jesus was healing her sacral center, okay, he reharmonized her center by cleansing it of lust and addiction, and her creative energy became free flowing, okay? Because also back then there was a lot of women that were literally paid to have sex with men for spiritual means, okay? So even though she was not a prostitution in a sense that we understand, okay, two things can be true at once. She could have been a woman that enjoyed having sex, okay? And that could be hard for some people to hear, especially if you've had a lot of religious dogma, but also been somebody that was very spiritually awake but not enlightened, okay? Two things can be true at once. So when he cleansed her of her lust and addiction, and it allowed that energy to become free flowing, because especially for us as women, our creative power comes from our womb, okay? I want women to also understand that. Then the third power was ignorance. So in ignorance, the obstacle is distorted beliefs or false teachings, okay? So think about people that specifically lead people astray on purpose. They've not done their research. It's just to help their own agenda, whatever that looks like, okay? So the energy center would be the solar plexus, which your stomach is your second brain. So that's your mental programming, false wisdom, or you're impressed by archons. Because think about it, demons can have knowledge, archons can have knowledge, archons can even present themselves as light beings, okay? You have to have discernment. That's where gnosis comes in. When Gnostics talk about gnosis, how do you somatically feel around this person? How do you somatically feel when you hear these teachings? Your body is the highest form of technology, okay? The liberation was when the soul affirmed the knowledge of its origins. So when the soul acknowledged, it knows where it came from. This is how people get blocked up whenever they talk about passing through the archonic gates, right? If they're able to convince you, oh no, like you have to go back to earth, like you fucked up too many times, you're this, you're that, and you listen to that programming, how did that make you feel as a soul? Because even if you're not in a body, you still have soul awareness, right? When you're out out of this body, okay? So when Jesus was, helping clear her, solar plexus, he was clearing her of indoctrination and shame, awakening her inner knowing, awakening her gnosis, okay? This gave her authority over Peter, right? And the male disciples who doubted her, because she was Christed first. Even the other disciples said, we know the Savior loved you more than us. We know he was alone with you. What did he tell you? Why would she lie? How many times do men think a woman is lying, or they don't want to trust a woman's inner knowing just because their own ego? Men get in their heads more because they are not as in tune with themselves, with their emotions, with their body. Because again, society at large doesn't want them to be. Not just society, this matrix that is like its own simulation specifically is trying to get men to not be in tune with that. So that way, even when they have a partner as a woman, they cannot be in tune with that. Okay? Because everybody, again, has a masculine and a feminine side. And having one without the other will always end up something not being right. Then the next one would be excitement of death, which is one that really spoke to me and was hard for me to understand. But when I read a book, it's called Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. When she talked about this and talked about how so many women want to kill themselves, statistically, if we try to commit it more often, it's because we get so tired of living underneath this control of never being good enough, no matter what we do, how we are, how much educated we get, whatever. Men always see us as just a piece of meat, right? And that excitement of death is one of the hardest one, I think, for obviously men as well to overcome, because when the world gets too tough, or you feel like you're not fitting this perfect box that society or this matrix system has put up for us, we just don't want to be a part of it anymore. We want to take ourselves out. So excitement of death is craving for death, and the obstacle is your ego's fascination with decay, with violence, with cycles of destruction. It represents the archon's claim that humans belong to corruption. You are not born sinful, babe. You are not born sinful. You are a fucking divine spark of life, or you would not be alive. Your meat suit, your brain, yes, tries to keep you safe. This is why they say your brain will return to a familiar hell over a new heaven every time, because that's your brain's job. Keep you safe. Keep you safe. So when archons or anybody that is in any religious dogma says humans are inherently sinful, it makes a human panic, thinking, who do I need to worship, or what do I need to pay for my sins in order to go to heaven? When in reality, heaven and hell are right here among us, babe. There is people out there cultivating heaven for everyone, and there's people out there cultivating for hell for everyone. And the only way you can discern between the two is, what does it represent somatically in your body, and what does that look like for everyone as a whole? If you are in love with some form of separatism, racism, sexism, fascism, something is wrong internally with you, and you need to look into it. Not to be shameful about it, but to question why you have those beliefs. Something is attached to you, making you think that you are separate from someone based on skin, based on sex. You are not separate from anyone. We are all from the same pool of consciousness, no matter what it is. Okay? So that energy center that it represents, which this makes the most sense, your heart chakra, trauma, grief, rage that feeds that death crave. It lives in your heart. Okay? So how do you get liberated from that? That was when the soul proclaims her freedom from death, affirming her belonging to the living God. There is a source creator, and that source creator does not think that people should die in made up wars. That source creator does not think that you're better than a person because of your race. That source creator does not think that you should just submit to your husband and that your husband only has the say. That is an archonic influence streamed, attached to a false source. Okay? If it is not representing unity and equilaterally amongst all races, all genders, if it is not helping everyone universally, then it is representing separatism, and it is not from true source of all. Okay? When Jesus was healing Mary, he cleansed her heart field, transforming her grief and rage into compassion. This is what truly broke the archonic grip of despair and generational trauma for Mary. It makes so much sense. 5 is the kingdom of the flesh. So kingdom of the flesh would be total domination by your bodily instincts and archonic programming through flesh. Think about how bad it is that we have so much pornography addiction right now. For men or women, really. I've struggled with it too, but specifically for men. Because women are way better at gaining control of their bodily urges. Women are now going fucking abstinent in the wake of understanding how hard it is to find a man that has total control over his lustful desires when it's at his fingertips, right? So the energy center that it represents is the throat chakra, enslaved by voice or repeating only what the body and society command. Okay? Any man or woman that can't control your lustful desires, you can't control anything else in your life. You might think you have control of whatever, but if one thing is controlling you, then you are not control of anything. Okay? Especially when it comes to your own body. And that is something that I've had to work through from my own sexual trauma to my own hypersexuality, because a lot of times when you go through sexual trauma, it goes one of two ways. You're either turned off by any type of sexual contact or you become hypersexual. And that is what I did. I had so much excessive sexual prowess as a young child because of my sexual trauma that I kept finding outlets to use it over and over again so I could try to feel better about myself. And that is what I think a lot of men do, is that whether they feel unwanted by society or by their wives or whatever, they think that it is normal to just go and lust after women that are just these constructs. They're not, even as women, we get attached to like, oh my God, why does he see these other women? But babe, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with his own ego and his own brain thinking that that is normal and healthy, when in reality, he needs to look inwards and say, what type of lifestyle are you not providing for yourself? If you're not honoring your own self, that you feel the need to turn to your lustful desires and to dive into them regularly and be addicted to pornography. That is something so many men are working through. And us as women, we want to shame men, which is something that I've had to work through, is not shaming my husband or shaming another man about something, but actually asking them and loving them in a way to ask them to turn inwards. Turn inwards. What is going on with you psychologically that you think that's the answer? We all have our shit, but there's some things that we struggle with more as women that men struggle with more as men. And that is damn sure one thing, is craving of the flesh, or kingdom of the flesh. So the liberation of it is when the soul speaks truth, asserting her divine identity over her bodily enslavement. When Jesus was healing her, he opened her throat chakra by restoring her voice as the apostle to the apostles. Mary was the first apostle. There's 13 apostles. The number 12 is inverted. There should actually be 13 months out of the year. Again, we'll go over this in my zodiac episode, but I just want y'all to kind of pick up on these. Number 6 is foolish wisdom of the flesh. The obstacle would be false reasoning, cleverness that leads astray. Think cults, religion, false spirituality, occultists saying, I'm just all love and light. Foolish wisdom. Okay. The energy center would be your third eye. Okay. So this is, like I said, it's like the intellect divorced from the spirit. They're just talking about matter. They just think that physically, if they just present themselves as love and light, that's what they'll be. No. Liberation is the soul sees through false wisdom, claiming true vision. And when Jesus was healing Mary, he clears her inner sight by purging the archonic false light from her mind's eye, seeing directly without distortion. Okay? Because especially back then, the religious dogma of making her feel shameful, especially if she was a woman that was known to have sex with people, obviously she was attached to some archonic influences, streams of consciousness. Okay? 7th, and the last one, is wrathful wisdom. Okay. And this is another one I've struggled with hardcore, because the more awakened I got, the more angry and sad I got, and I wanted to take it out on everyone. And then I came to another level of awareness of realizing that never changes anyone. Shaming people, being angry at people, yelling and screaming at people, it doesn't change. I have to help people through this way. Yeah, I might be very, I'm talking loud and I'm this like this, but I'm not going to be, you dumbass motherfucker, how could you not see this? I didn't know this. I had to research this for years and years, and now I'm still implementing it the last 2 years as I truly embody it, because I was intellectualizing it for years. It takes time and effort in working through trauma to become aware of how to help other people come to this awareness. Okay. And that's why I'm doing it, because I feel like it is my calling to do so with anything that I've ever researched. I'm not going to gatekeep shit. I love to yap. And so I'm doing it to help other people figure out their own souls. So the obstacle is the final mask of the ego. Hostile, aggressive distortion of the ego using knowledge as a weapon. Okay. The energy center is your crown center. When inverted, it channels pride, violence, archonic domination instead of divine union. Liberation is the soul rises beyond wrath, entering peace, claiming unity with the eternal. Jesus' healing, when he was helping Mary, he crowned Mary with light. Literally think of fucking Halo, you guys. It like makes me want to cry, because just understanding that about yourself, or for myself, like, we all have shit. We have 7 generations deep of trauma embedded inside of our DNA. None of us are absolved of going inwards and asking ourselves, why do we do the things that we do? If we are not fully thriving in all of our relationships and feel fully safe and comfortable with ourselves, what is that? Right? So the liberation was the soul rises beyond wrath, entering peace, claiming unity with the eternal one, right? And when Jesus crowned her with that light, completing the clearing of her body, it completed the clearing of the archonic influence, and her energy centers were aligned with divine source, no longer manipulated by any hostile forces or archonic influence. This is the seven powers. It's an egoic map to help you understand where you struggle. Where you struggle might not be where somebody else struggles. So in reality, all of us, you can't just die to your ego one time. Your soul has been fragmented through many lifetimes. Even in this lifetime, 7 generations deep, it's been fragmented. Your DNA calling out for certain thought patterns and things to replay out, right? For you, you have to pass through your own 7 gates. There is the book I'm reading, the energy codes. Y'all can go as we near the end of this. I want you to understand, I have a Patreon now. I'm starting to do one-on-one bookings with people. I am starting to post things on there. I have multiple tiers. The cheapest, you can sign up for free. I put stuff on there for free. The cheapest tier though is $11. The most expensive is $55. $55 gets you a 1-month meeting with me every month where we check in. I am also reading the book, The Energy Codes, out loud on my Patreon for everybody to hear. If you are any paid tier, right? Not for the free ones, because if I'm reading a book word for word and you don't want to go and buy it because the book itself is $11. If you want to pay $11, you can listen to me read it, okay? Or if not, I'm going to put it up there for sale. Each one that I read, you can buy each one. But in the book, The Energy Codes, they talk about doing a central scan every day where you can literally do a meditation and scan through your energy centers. And if your brain skips a color or an energy center, that means there's a blockage there. And those colors, like in my biofield episode, those chakras relate to a color. They relate to food. So if you have a blockage, you could wear that color more. You could color that color more. Literally, you could eat that color more. Literally, start asking your body questions and your body will respond. Your body is the highest form of technology. And to live as your soulful self, your most connected self to source, you are the conduit between the angel and the devil. You are the conduit. We can be the devils or the angels walking amongst earth. Okay? This story has been told throughout history through women and their divine masculine counterparts. Think about each of those stories. There was still a male, right? But in Mary and Jesus, it was flipped to where even though Jesus also died, like some of the other male counterparts did, Mary also was there during the resurrection. Mary kept Jesus alive in her heart. Mary was the first one to see him. Mary was the apostle to the apostles. Mary was a central figure, but specifically was left out because of archonic dominance through patriarchal control. Because, again, we all, male and women alike, have a male and a feminine side to us as the human soul. And it is in your energy centers. It's out in your biofield, but it's also in your energy centers. And I want everyone to understand, you are not a problem to fix. You are a soul to love. The more you love yourself and ask yourself questions you would if you're talking to a small child, and if you have problems with small children, you also need to look into that because they are the most abused and used groups of people among us, okay? Start talking to yourself like your own inner child. Start loving yourself like you are your own daughter, your own sister, your own best friend. Start every day, set a timer to meditate, to shift through your thoughts, because the more you shift through them and are able to question what comes up for you that day in a loving manner, the easier it is to start having that open flow connection to source, because then you can start observing where your thought patterns are coming from. I had so many dark thoughts that I have not had in years, you guys, only since I started meditating, only since I started doing breath work, only since I was able to stop those thought patterns by going inwards. So I just want y'all to know that these stories were suppressed for a reason, right? It's crazy to me to see those similarities, and I've never heard anybody say these patterns out loud. I've seen them individually talk about certain things that are kind of like Jesus' story, right? But not all together, thread them together. And there's even more stories that are like this. I just put a few, right? And so to me, it's really becoming aware it's the same archetype of wisdom descending, shattering, and rising again. It's a cosmic cycle. And right now, I truly feel like as a collective, we are in another resurrection of wisdom, right? Even Mary Magdalene prophesies about a resurrection of wisdom within humanity, meaning becoming aware of what we truly are in the cosmos, because as above, so below. You are your own personal galaxy. The more you work on yourself, the more you help the general collective. I know it sounds cliche, but it is the fucking truth. If every person in this world were to go inwards, do you think they would be able to have control over us if we knew God is not outside of us and God is within us? And not God, the big man in the sky, a source of consciousness, a pool of consciousness, and that we are divine sparks of that pool of consciousness that has been spiritualized by wisdom itself. It's not just about, when I say the rise of the divine feminine, I'm not just talking about, oh, trad wives and women, blah, blah. No, I'm talking about, it's about wisdom through gnosis, through everybody becoming aware, internally using themselves as the compass, having discernment, you making this free flow of energy of their divine and masculinity flowing freely to have that connection with source and with themselves as the human here. And it's about honoring and balancing that divine feminine principle that has been so imbalanced. I am so grateful that you guys stuck with me through today and just listened to me yap my heart out. But these are things that I just feel like if I'm learning about them, I want everyone else to learn about them too, and just how profound these types of teachings are. And if you want to go, you can follow, you can like and subscribe on my YouTube. I have a TikTok, T Mills, TMILLSBBY 2311. Then I also have an Earth to Taylor pod TikTok too, which I need to be better about posting. I know I went MIA, I was just gone for the summer, but I'm going to be better about it. I'm just grateful for all my new followers on here. Hello, everybody. And I can't wait to see where this goes. My goal, you guys, would be able to get better, an actual studio. I would love to be able to actually interview people like Sue Morter from the Energy Codes, or physicists or spiritualists, or people that have been in this type of game for so long, or scientists that are realizing, just so many cool things that I think we could go with this. And just the more you guys support me, the more I'm going to pour back into this podcast. Really, truly being able to get to a point to where it's so well-rounded that I can have people on here to talk about these kinds of things with. And so I'm just grateful for all of you guys, and I'm glad you guys are sticking with me. I'll make sure that I will have another episode done for you guys. Again, this was my third time re-recording this, and I hope it goes through. And I hope you guys have a good week. You can also turn on your notifications for when I do post the next episode. But again, I'm just grateful you guys are all here. Bye.